Julie Binter, welcome back to the Made Leader podcast. I'm so glad to have you on.
Thank you, Jen Arnold. It's nice to see you again.
Well, for anyone listening for the first time, I just want to explain the episode and then I'm going to get you to introduce yourself. But, once a month or so, I think this one's a little bit delayed, that Julie and I get together and we kind of discuss a question that has come up in with the leaders we're working with. Anonymous, of course. And so we've got a situation today that we want to discuss and I guess get your input, get my input, and hopefully it'll help somebody out there. But before we dive into the question, Julie, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jen. My name is Julie Binter. I'm based here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a coach, I am a consultant, and I'm a facilitator. And I've been working in professional development and leadership development for going on almost 25 years. And over time have discovered a passion for helping leaders really hone in on what works, what doesn't, and figure out those practical strategies. And then through coaching, help them implement and help them make progress. So I'm excited to be here. This is one of my favorite things I do every month. So thanks for
Yeah,
having me back.
it's great to have you. And you are an excellent coach, facilitator, and consultant. And you always you draw out some really wonderful questions in these conversations. So thank you for that. But today, here's the situation that's going on. I'll phrase it as just a statement and give a little context. The problem that we want to talk through is when someone's leadership style doesn't fit in with the culture that where they work. Okay, so this situation, not completely new to the organization, but newer. And the problem with the culture is that it's too what I'd call laissez-faire
Okay.
on standards, on um, approaches, expectations. And then this leader is really used to things being buttoned up, there being processes, there being a lot of expectations, high standards. And the organization maybe doesn't have this in place quite yet. So let's work through this situation. I've got a list of bullets here, but what comes up for you first when you hear that situation?
Well, I'm going to start off with snarky. And
Oh,
I don't
yes.
know if this is going through anybody else's head, but did you get the spidey sense that the culture was maybe not in alignment with your own when you went through the interview process? Because I've definitely had experiences where the interview process itself is so outside of my comfort zone or interest that I kind of wonder, if this is the interview process, I wonder. However, we all are looking at opportunities. And so that's the snarky answer. I don't know if you want to comment on that,
I
if you were thinking
do.
that.
No, I wasn't actually, but I think it's a legit it's something to bring up. Okay, I would say in interviews, we're all in different mindsets when it comes to interviews, right? So maybe the employer told a better game than what they actually have, because that happens.
Yes.
We put on a bright and shiny. Well, of course you want to work here and you'll have all this autonomy and you can change everything. And you get there and like, they can't. So that
That's
happens. Let's
right.
be honest. The other part is sometimes it's the candidate, their mindset. They're like, I really want to make this work. This seem like you almost go in saying this is going to work, and you ignore the red flags, right? So I think there's
Mhm.
both situations that do happen in an interview.
Yeah. So then as we get started, what I'll put out there is if you happen to be a leader in the future who is looking at a new role in a new organization, I would highly encourage you to figure out what types of questions, and AI can help you figure those out or talking to other people, but maybe have some questions in your back pocket that you could ask if there are definitely things that you would like to have in the culture that are important to you as a leader. Because again, we then find ourselves in situations that I liked your point about we didn't know or they presented a different story than what we were expecting. But
Yeah.
definitely encourage the asking.
You're making me think of one other thing. I'm glad you brought this up because I do know somebody who interviewed for a role and they did say, yeah, you have all this creativity and you can really make fast action and change. And they got there and it was not the case. And so I think I love what you said about the questions. And I would encourage not asking just, hey, what kind of autonomy do I have? Or do I have autonomy? But saying, give me an example of how that would work, right? Like, how would I be able to make change how fast is the process, or give me an example of a project that someone else has done that they were able to carry through, because they could say you have autonomy and it's fast change, but your fast change and their fast change are not the same things, right? They're like,
Exactly.
they're thinking a year, you're thinking a month. And so I
Yep.
think it's good to ask those questions and also get very specific examples. And what does that look like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also too, I mean, one of the questions that comes to mind too is, what does a successful leader at this organization look like?
Good one.
Right? When you think of the ones that are really doing well here, how would you describe them? And, within that question, it's a very innocent, vague question, but I definitely think depending on who you're talking to, you'll get some good information that you can expand and keep going with what you were saying as well. So
Yeah, that's a great question. I like that one.
yeah, it's a fun one. I wish I would have asked that way more than I have. I
I
unfortunately didn't learn it early enough in my career.
gosh. Why did I'm trying to think of the last time I've actually interviewed for a job, and it was, oh God, 2008 is when I last interviewed for a job. So, hey, I'm a little rusty
There
and
you
I don't even know
go.
what I'm saying in an interview, but there's that.
Yeah.
Um, I had a thought, but before I go into the next thought, what is your next step after the interview? So you started with the interview piece.
Yeah, I would say I'm kind of thinking, and I know we'll go into this further, but I kind of envision two paths that a leader can explore and pay attention to. One is their own desires and their own style and their own values. Because at the end of the day, if you find that the culture doesn't fit and you do want to stay at the organization, you're most likely going to have to flex in some way, or as we say with disc assessments, like stretch your rubber band. However, I've worked with a lot of leaders who say, I don't feel like I'm being authentic when I flex or adapt. I don't feel like I'm being true to my values. And so that's a different question. So being able to figure that out as soon as possible, I think is important, but also being patient enough to
Mhm.
really kind of get a feel. Cause I mean, it takes several months to really start getting your feet under you, to really start getting to know the organization truly, because everybody's in that honeymoon period, everybody's on their best behavior. I don't know. I usually wait about 6 months before I start really saying, okay, what am I seeing? What are some of the realities? So that would be one of
Yeah.
the things. Yeah. And then we can talk about the other one for the organization itself, but I would love to hear what you were going to say.
You know, I similar, right? So I think one of it is like, what doesn't fit exactly, right? Are you coming in too rigid with your standards? Like, did
Mm,
that work really well in the last organization, but it's completely different sector? Um, but and I know where they came from, so it's a completely different environment. So, is it something that you really should put on this new employer? Because it's it's not how you were successful in the last organization. So I think one is like, what doesn't fit that you are willing to adapt to that's changeable? Because
yeah.
some things are changeable. Like you need to change your approach to say, okay, well, my leader is a little bit more loosey goosey with details and deadlines. Okay, well, that's something you manage up differently.
Right.
I think the other piece is exactly what I was thinking, what you were saying is like, versus what's a core value? Like, what is
Hmm.
something that is a non-negotiable that you're like, look, no, I believe in having high expectations and us achieving and succeeding, and that's just not going to happen here. And I know I wouldn't feel good in this organization if I couldn't have that, if I couldn't express that value, right? If it's going to keep getting undermined around me. So
Yeah.
I think adapting, you have to think about what is it exactly that is bothering me? What is changeable? What can I adapt to? And what can I live with? And what are you like,
Mhm.
no, I cannot, I can't negotiate on these things. Ain't happening.
Well, and we know when you have conflict with something, usually it's because it's pushing up against your values. So
Mm.
it's a signal, right? When you're starting to have that conflict. But I also want to consider the flip side, because getting more into the strengths focused coaching and work as well. And this question of, what are we actually aligned on in this organization? Like, are there things that my style and the style of the other leaders are actually similar, or we have in common? Because sometimes we pinpoint those things that are really irritating or, causing us
Mhm.
conflict, and we forget that that's probably like maybe what, hopefully 50% or less. But if you've stayed in that environment, there's probably things that are working. And I do feel like it's important to ask yourself, there's what aspects of my leadership are working well here? Where am I aligned with the culture? So that you do then look at those areas of development to maybe take a breath, have a little bit more patience and say, okay,
Mhm.
this stuff over here is working. How do I move the needle a little bit to lessen the impact
Mhm.
of the things that aren't working?
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kinda made me think of, your natural styles, your natural tendencies. They may lend themselves better to certain environments, right? And so you may notice that some of the conflict is like what you just said, other people have different strengths than you, right? So maybe I'm going back to the adapting piece, but just recognizing what other people are good at around you. I love what you said about the strengths, making sure that you are going, okay, well, people don't, let's just say you have this mental model or this story that people are just lazy, they're just phoning it in. Are you is that really the best leadership mindset that you wanna go out with, right? You're gonna say, "Alright, what if," a question that I heard on one of my other podcast interviews is like, "If you looked at everyone with potential, what if everyone had potential here?" And you
Mm,
flipping it, so it's along the lines of
yes.
what you said, it's focusing on the strengths and the alignment with,
Yeah.
the organization, the people, and you.
Well, you actually made me think of another layer to this. So we know from experience that as leaders, if we're not super aware, we will hire people that are like us. And so,
Mm,
yeah, so if you are in an organization and you don't feel like your leadership style aligns or is, co- you know, um, in concert with the style of the organization, and you start bringing in people to your own team that have your leadership style, you could potentially be causing a turnover problem because whatever you're experiencing, if you don't do the work, if you don't make the effort to really figure out, is this working? Can I make it work? Do I need to stay? Do I need to go? And you bring somebody else in with your style, they're going to struggle with the exact same things.
mhm.
And that can cause some of, those retention challenges that we all try to avoid. So it's interesting. When you were just talking about what you shared, I that made me think about there's a danger there if we don't manage it and deal with it before we start bringing in folks that might be like us. They could struggle with the same thing.
Yeah, and, as a leader, I've done that. I've hired people that were so much like me, and I didn't realize it till after the fact. "Oh, they're all little carbon copies." But you're in it, and you don't think about it, and you probably want a little of the company, right? You're like, "Oh, yeah, this person, they're gonna get some stuff done and gonna be just like me." And then, yeah, same problems, or you 2 are gonna be alienated by yourselves. You're gonna be on an island.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, you definitely wanna have people on your team. I mean, there's the argument out there. We want people on our team that are gonna be compliments of us, but when you are hiring, it is quite difficult sometimes to go over the hurdle of the preferences and biases that we might have in the process because we want somebody we're more comfortable with somebody who's like us.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think part of it is too, I'm going back to that exactly teasing out what isn't fitting, right? So, is it the leadership there? Is it how they are allowed to lead? Is it, their peers? Yeah, so it's multifaceted, but I'm always big on honest conversations. I know a lot of people are not, big on bringing them up because it's very uncomfortable.
right.
But I think it shows a great strength in if you are a leader and you're going to your leader and going, "Hey, I feel like I'm just, something's not clicking here." You probably wouldn't say that. This is the danger of me coming up with a script off the top of my head, but, like, acknowledging it, like, or saying, "Hey, I feel like I'm getting off to a slow start. What's your advice for me to get up to speed?" Just anything that could open the door to something's just feeling off, and
Yeah.
I wanna be successful here. Please know I'm completely dedicated, but what can I do to better align with the culture, better align with your philosophy for the department, whatever that looks like. But I'm big on that. That may open the door to your leader saying, in fact, yes, there's a few things that I would like you to work on. But at least it opens the door to it. It shows that you're trying and that you've noticed, you're self aware, um, and to have the conversation potentially.
Yeah. I think that's a big piece of this too, is we can get in our heads quite a bit, and we can think that it's about us trying to get others to shift, or trying to figure out how can I adapt so I can, get what I need to get done here. And this asking others for feedback, asking others for advice is so incredibly important. And I think it's a trust builder. I think it's a credibility builder. If you are humble enough to be able to approach, maybe there's people you've created relationships with in your first, I don't know, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, right? People that you would consider allies. Maybe they're not like you, but maybe you have developed a relationship, to be
Mm.
able to go to them and say this very thing. So if you're not comfortable asking your own leader, asking your peers, asking others in the organization what they're seeing, or again, what does a successful leader sound like, look like, feel like here? I want to make sure I'm aligning so that I can still have influence. I want to make sure I'm aligning so that
Mm.
I can still move forward and help the organization. And asking for that feedback again is definitely vulnerability for sure.
Yes. Well, I love what you said about asking peers or asking a trusted relationship across the organization because, yeah, not everyone's going to go to the leader and say, hey, look, something's off, man. I don't know what it is. That may
Exactly.
not be what you say. So make it's safer that way. But I think too, you can ask or you can also observe. It's very
Mhm.
you'll observe and say,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, that leader is getting recognized for that," or "My boss seems to always gravitate towards this leader, my peer." What is it? And you have to be careful because you can make up stories when you observe, and that's one thing to be
Mhm.
mindful of, but you can look at, "I see this," and get curious. Isn't that's interesting. I wonder what it is, right? Like, I wonder why she seems to be getting all the resources while I don't, right?
Yep.
And I think observing is a great way just to look around, notice,
Mhm.
don't get pissed,
Yep.
get curious and
Stay
say
high level.
yeah, well,
Stay
it's
in your
almost
good
like that
place.
a good way to do that is that third party perspective, right? It's almost
Yeah.
like you're looking at it as an outsider. You're saying, "All right, I'm gonna detach from myself and say, huh, look at that. That's interesting," right? Like you're watching a play or a movie or something, and that can help take some of the emotion out of it. But if your goal is to say, I something doesn't feel right. I don't feel like I fit in. I can't be true to my natural leadership style or the leadership styles that have been successful for me in the past, then I think it's important for you to say, "All right, well, first step, you can ask questions, but it's being self-aware and trying to get better." If you wanna
Yeah.
stay with the organization,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And you have to make that decision.
Mhm.
And I think too, I think we've talked about this on maybe on another conversation, but asking for feedback potentially puts the other person at risk, because if they don't know you, don't trust you, aren't sure, they don't want to offend you, they don't like
Mhm.
conflict, it's going to be hard for them to come up with something specific or meaningful, potentially. So
Mhm.
I know, and I always say, I can't remember if it's Adam Grant or Simon Sinek that talks about ask for advice. So make it forward focused and say, what advice? You don't even have to go into, I don't feel like things are working. You can just say, I want to be effective as I can be here. What advice do you have for me to move forward? And if people love giving their advice. Harder to
Yeah,
give feedback if the trust isn't there yet. So that's
yeah.
why I was mentioning, like, try to ask the people that you already feel like you have relationships with, or you're allied with. But if you need somebody's opinion, you can just ask them for advice. And if you're newer in the organization, I mean, in some organizations, being new is 10 years.
It's really
Others, it might be 6 months. But I think, and you mentioned this earlier, it shows that you're self aware and it shows that you're paying attention. And that's a big piece of being an effective leader, is paying attention and observing what's going on around you.
It was Adam Grant, by the way.
Thank
About
you.
advice, yeah, 'cause I saw that and I was like, "That's brilliant." Now I use it too.
Yeah,
So it was Adam Grant,
yes,
and I think
thank you.
it's a great piece of advice.
Yeah, it is. It is. What advice do you have?
So I had one more, but it's more on kind of the end of, an employee life cycle, so I didn't know if you had anything else before I jump to that piece.
Um, I think the only other thing that comes to mind, and when I think about my past experience and the leaders that I coach, we really when you first come into an organization, you really wanna make a bang, you really wanna make be successful, you wanna show them that they made the right decision, and I always encourage leaders, and I had to teach myself this, is to kinda slow down, and I know there's that phrase out there, "Slow down to speed up." It's we are eager as leaders to want everything to work, we wanna get results, and if we can slow down and be aware, observe, take inventory of what's going on around us, what we'll do is we won't jump in with maybe some of the behaviors that are ineffective. Maybe we're just spending time observing and saying, "Ooh, that's not how I show up." Because at the end of the day, you're going to lose some of your impact. You're going to lose some of your influence if people right out of the gate, you're like doing all these things that bump up against their understanding of effective leadership in the organization. So that's what I would throw out there. I think that's the last thing that came to mind is about your timing or your being more patient, slowing down a little bit, taking inventory and not rushing. Um,
Mm. And I'll challenge you a little bit on that. I agree. Although, let's just say that you are more of a thoughtful, slow to make a decision leader and you go into a fast-paced environment, you may need to change your approach
yes.
there, right? So
Yep.
it's it all goes back to the interview. I'm so
It
glad you brought up the interview
does. It
because
does.
if I were ever to get a job in an organization again, I would have to have a lot of autonomy. I would have to be able to go lightning fast. And so moving to something that's slower and needs a ton of approvals would not work for me.
Yeah.
But I think it depends. So whatever your natural style is, you may have to slow down, you may have to speed up to match
Very
the
good
pace of the
point.
organization. Um, Knowing that beforehand is great, but I think no matter where you are, I think about some of these places that are growing and scaling quickly, right? Or organizations. I've had a friend who worked at startups and she loved the startup phase, but once it started getting to be more corporate, she's like, "Ooh, I don't like this," right? So it can change because
Yeah.
organizations change and grow. And so you could be perfectly happy when as your leadership style is completely bang on, and then the
Mhm.
organization shifts, right? It goes faster, it goes slower, it changes, and then it doesn't fit. So it can happen a variety of ways.
Yeah. And even I think when you're in your own so say you're not even interested in going out and looking for a new role, you could even just take stock of where you are now and how things are going now. Because I think even if the culture of the organization you're in isn't in conflict with you, I'm assuming all of us will have at least one or two things that are like, "Ugh, this is the part of the process." Like, "Oh, it's so hierarchical here, and I really wish it was a lot more flat," or
Mhm.
"It takes forever, and I wanna move faster," or "It goes too fast, and I wanna take my time," right? So, I do think just having that self-knowledge and self-awareness and maybe, we've talked about promoting somebody or knowing when somebody's ready for promotion. Maybe that could be an added layer in your own development of your people is getting them to start thinking about that ahead of time. So it's not,
Mhm.
oops, I took this job and I don't think it's
Mhm.
the right fit. And now
Mhm.
I'm here and I have to
Yeah.
figure myself out. But maybe a little bit more awareness is going to get them to the interview questions
Yeah.
better.
But I think I just want to put a fine point on what you just said was that there's gonna be a time you're gonna bump up against the organization in a way that you don't like. It's just inevitable. You cannot like everything your organization does, everything your leader does, everything your peers do. It's just life. So I think it goes back to those skills that you and I talk about. You talk a lot about emotional intelligence. I talk about emotional agility and resilience. It's managing your own temperament, your own feelings and mindset around this, right? Because things aren't gonna move at the
Yeah.
pace you want all the time.
Yeah.
how do you build those skills up and make sure that you are showing up as the way you want to come across, right?
I am so shocked to hear that you say that things don't happen the way we want them to 100% of the time. I mean, wow, I've never had that experience. Things always happen the way I
Oh.
want them to.
I know, it's why we work for ourselves, right? Because
Exactly.
well, I
Oh,
think it comes,
crazy.
going back to this question. It is that urgency that you want the organization to fit to you better, right? Like you in the urgency is that piece that you need to really look inside and go, why am I feeling so urgent? What doesn't feel about it, right? Because I always say it is what it is, right? The
Yeah.
organization's not changing to conform to you. And I think that gets to my last point is decide if this is for you or if you need a better fit. Um, and if you say, yeah, I'm completely dedicated to this company and I need it to fit, well, then it's you adapting, right? Like,
Yep.
is that, because if you need to stay for whatever your reasons you need to, want to, etcetera, that means you adapt.
Yep.
And if you feel like you can't, then that means look outside.
Yeah.
I'm making it too simple.
Well, at the end of the day, it's gonna cause you more stress. It's gonna cause you more pain, and it's also gonna cause the people in the organization more pain if you're unhappy, they're unhappy, and you're not able to do the work that you came to do. I mean, I think there's a nice I think there's a nice amount of time that you could say like, "Hey, let's give this 6 months, 12 months, 18 months," whatever it is. You have to pick your time frame, but to set a limit and say like, "By the time I hit this time period, I would like to have more clarity on this, and I would like to know what my next step is," so that you're not just staying in it and then becoming that curmudgeon or that
Mhm.
person who, because then you end up making it worse. It's
And
not
your
just a
people
style
feel it.
difference. Oh gosh,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, they know when
So
you're not happy. They know when you're, like, annoyed, like, they know it rubs off on them for sure,
it does.
and, that's why you always stay networking, you always stay connected. I mean, it's a terrible job market right now, so if you need to stay, you need to stay. Um, but I'd also say you said 6 months earlier, which that's I know you just threw that out there, but it made me think of when I moved here to the Las Vegas area. I hated it, like, I don't know, I don't think we knew each other then, but I texted a friend who used to live here for 6 years, and I said, "Look, I wanna move back to North Carolina. I cannot do this." And she's like, "Give it a year, Jen. Just give it a year." And it took
Ah,
a full year. I got
yep,
there, but it took a full year. So, giving yourself that year-ish, it doesn't always come quick, but if, like you said, give yourself that timeline, I'm gonna give myself 18 months. I'm gonna give myself 2 years, whatever that looks like. Besides, because if you're gonna go to another job, you want to have probably something that you've accomplished there
yeah,
before you leave,
absolutely.
right? You say, "Oh, I did this
Yeah,
while I was there. It's a short time, but man, I got
yeah.
this done," right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the data you're looking at in that time frame as well? Like, how will you know that you are a good fit? How will you know that you aren't a good fit? What is the information that you're paying attention to? Because hearing you say that about, I don't, I get here, I get to Vegas, and then I don't want to be here anymore. We do make those split-second decisions based on those initial reactions we have to the stress and the unknown. And sometimes we then start saying to your, I think we talked about having your story, right?
Yeah.
We carry that story. And so I'm going to guess probably a bunch of things happened over the course of that year, but you were maybe a little bit more resistant at the beginning because you're like, well, I hate it. So no, I don't want this. Right. And I think about when you're in an organization, if you make a split-second decision at the very beginning, that's the lens you're using for the rest of the time. And that's why this introspection and, hire a coach, right? Like, get
Go.
some help, get a mentor,
Mhm.
get a coach, talk to trusted advisors, and challenge yourself and challenge your thinking because it's most likely one way of looking at it, and everyone else's perceptions are probably have some nuance or some difference. So,
I cannot love that enough that you just said that because you make that split-second decision, but it could just be discomfort, right? You're labeling like, I was completely out of my comfort zone. You talk about completely 360 from the Southeast, you come to Vegas. what the hell was I expecting, right? It's knowing you're just sitting there going, what did we do? I know no one here. This feels very hard, uncomfortable. I don't like it. Right. So
Mhm.
I like that you said that because people, maybe it's just the discomfort. Maybe it's just the change you need to figure out how to be successful in. So
Yeah,
it's very insightful.
thank you. It's about life experience and leader experience that I work. The leaders I work with have these experiences, and I know I've experienced that myself. And so, in hindsight, you can see it, but in the moment, when you're in that emotional reaction, it's really hard to call it out, and you have to bring yourself back down to base and be like, okay, let's take a step back. Let's take a breath. Let's slow down a
Mhm.
minute. Let's take inventory. I know I've said that word about 17 times now.
I haven't heard it that much. It's okay. Well,
Awesome.
yeah, and I have to say now it's 3.5 years being here, and
Mhm.
it's interesting. I know we're going on a weird rabbit hole here, but I'm reflecting on what you just said.
Yeah.
So, I do like it here. I have friends here, I have a professional network here, but I still question if this is the right culture for me.
Mm,
So
there you go.
I still question it. I'm happy here, so not planning to move anytime soon, but it's like in the
Mm,
back of my mind, right? Like,
yep.
and so I think that could be the same for someone in an organization. I can be happy here, I can thrive here, but is there always that doubt that you're, maybe, maybe not?" And I think that's just
Yeah.
more important for the introspection, that piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what else? Anything else? That was my list. Anything you wanna end
Yeah,
on?
I feel like we covered it all. So I think and we led off in a couple different directions, but I think definitely the self, really thinking about that self-awareness piece and then thinking about the other awareness piece and checking in with others, paying attention to what's working, what's not, uh, trying to decide what it is you are willing to flex or what you aren't willing to flex. And you'll know, again,
Mhm.
the conflicting feelings pop up as soon as you're bumping up against things that don't feel authentic or things that don't match your values. And I always listen to that. And then I
Yeah.
question that. Like, I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, I'll just make one, last statement because that made me think of just making sure as a leader, you're crystal clear on what those values are.
Yeah.
Right? You can call them values, call them non-negotiables. What are the things that you need in an organization that you are going to either thrive or you like, we're not saying like your values like integrity, like of course, don't steal, don't lie, all that stuff. That's a given. But
Yes.
what are the
Let's
the
hope.
things? Yeah. But what are your values? What are your non-negotiable? What are the things you need? And sit and list them down separately. Just do it as a thought exercise. And
Yeah.
then say, okay, am I living into these? Am I able to live into these? If not, how can I live into these? Right? Can I do these in different ways? Because maybe there's some way you need to figure out how to use them more. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, just to take 5 minutes. There's values exercises out there. I can
Yep.
give you one if anyone needs one, but I think it's an important part just to sit down for a few minutes and figure that out.
It's huge. Doing that work myself has really helped me understand conflicts I have with other people, conflicts I have with situations, organizations. It's because there's a value being stepped on or bumped up against. And once I figure out what that is, then I know, okay, what do I want to do about it? What's happening that maybe I could change? So
Mhm.
I think that's so helpful to know where you're coming from. It's not just I'm irritated. It is this situation is really causing me a challenge because I value X and I see the direct, impact of the situation on my value. So how do I
Mhm.
want to move forward?
That made me think, what are your values? Now I'm curious.
Ugh. The biggest one always for a very long time has been integrity. That is a huge one for me. I've worked in a lot of places and been around a lot of people in my life that say one thing, do another, don't walk their talk, and I have to be very gracious or um, I don't know, gentle because some people aren't aware that they're doing it. But that is definitely one that's a big one for me. And then another one is about commitment and accountability and ownership. And I know that's kind of a three-pronged one, but it does connect to integrity, but it really is about, you own your part, you engage with others, they own their part, and that we're all coming together, that I'm not there to take some care of someone else and they're not there to take care of me, and that I would love to be able to collaborate, would love to be able to cooperate, would love to be able to achieve things together versus lone wolf or, my way or the highway kind of thing. So those are probably, I think I gave you what, 6?
No. There were like 3. Some are like multifaceted, but
Yeah.
no,
What are
good.
yours? What are yours?
So mine are definitely freedom and autonomy. Like it comes back over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter. Like all my job, when I look back at all of my jobs,
Mhm.
I had freedom, had autonomy. I could do my own thing. It was a beautiful, I
Nice.
mean, that's why I loved all my jobs. There wasn't a job I hated. So I got that creative freedom. I would say there's a piece of responsibility, although what I do a little bit is take too much responsibility. So I'm working on that. and then
Lifelong
challenge.
journey.
I know, aren't we all? Works in progress, but also challenge. I'm big into challenge. It comes clear on my disc style. Like I love a growth opportunity, and we can
Mm,
always make this better. And again, some of these can tip on the not so healthy side. Like I wouldn't be good doing status quo work.
yeah,
Like I
I'm
always
with
want to
you.
hear what's not working. Let's make it better. Like, it may hurt, but it would be something that I strive to do better and better.
Nice. I
Yeah.
wanna add growth and learning to my values list then, because
Nope,
that is
nope, no,
definitely, those are
no more.
priorities too. Yep. I wanna
You
have
can't
10
you can't add anymore, and
or 30.
I value everything.
Exactly. I do, I do.
Well, yeah, when I do the exercise with leaders, I say, come up with 5, but, like, really, there's some core ones that keep coming back, and I find the look back,
Absolutely.
like, when have you looked back and said, "These jobs, these
Mhm.
positions, these roles have really a lot," like, I felt like, "Oh, are there some common threads there?" And that helped me just to look back and go, "Oh, yeah,
I
those are
love
the
that.
things that I need." So,
Then I'm gonna have to add respect to that as well,
yeah,
because that's a big one.
I cannot. No more adding anything, Julie Binter.
I think I'm at 15 now. It's good. Oh,
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and hopefully people can take this and do something with it.
I sure hope so. If nothing else, it'll get you thinking, and hopefully maybe you can share it with somebody else who might be in that position, who might need a friend or a mentor. There you go.
Exactly. Well, until next time, Julie.
I look forward to it.